Welcome. I'm so happy to be your host today as we talk about what does leadership look like in the pandemic. I'm Melissa Sumnath. I go by pronoun she, her, and I'm so delighted to welcome you into this space as we have a dialogue through a couple of questions with our guests and panelists. Before we go into some intros with who's going to be joining us today, I would like to offer a land acknowledgement. And as we offer this land acknowledgement, our invitation for you is to not just listen, but to feel my words at the soul level, allowing the message to seep in and reverberate throughout your entire being. We humbly acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. This statement is not just an acknowledgement, but a call to action. We invite you to reflect on today's learnings, how they will benefit Indigenous peoples, how you will amplify Indigenous voices, and how you will move from acknowledgement to solidarity, kinship, and relationship building with Indigenous communities. With that, I'd like to bring up our panelists. And with that, I'll add them in here. We'll start off with Chad Stover. Dr. Chad Stover, who's our technical writer and data analyst, joining us today. Jason Murray, of course, our president and managing partner, with us here today. And Stacey Ann Buchanan, our marketing and content manager, a very tough act to follow. Of course, she is usually hosting us, and I'm humbling stepping into this space. I thought perhaps, we could kick off the discussion with our first question, which is, what advice do you have for senior leaders who are grappling with the idea of hybrid work versus work from home policies? And Jason, I was wondering if perhaps you could kick us off here.
Sure thing. Thanks so much for that, Melissa. So the advice that I would give is to listen. I think that by and large, leadership, sees their role as having to give some sort of direction. But this is a time where a lot of the direction needs to come from what you're hearing. There are a lot of conversations that we have, of course, when we're doing recruitment, where we're listening to candidates in terms of what they want or what they expect from their employer. And by and large, there's always a question now around, is this hybrid? Is this remote? But never is there anything around, I want to come into work full time. And so I'm hoping I get a key to the office. And so for us, it's almost like we're doing research on behalf of the marketplace to be able to say, if literally in every conversation that we're having these days, it's either, can I do this fully remotely or can I do this hybrid? It's really, really important for employers to listen. But I would also say that we always have to think about the context that our organization is operating within. So you always have to think of the larger ecosystem. So if we were applying this to real estate, sometimes is it a buyer's market or is it a seller's market? So applying it to the world of work, we have to ask ourselves, is it an employer market or is it an employee market? And it's the latter. In this day and age right now, it is more an employee market in terms of them having certain expectations of their employer. And so what I would also say is this is a time where employers also want to be thinking about how they can remain competitive. Because if you have too strict of a policy in terms of working from in the office, you may have retention issues. And then you may actually have some people who are otherwise great talent no longer working for your organization. I want to say that Dr. Chad Stauber, who is on this right now, works from out of Halifax as opposed to our main hub in Toronto. And so, yes, he did spend time in Toronto, but knowing that he was going to be making a move, we did not see that as a problem at all, because it's always best to still be able to work with great people. And I would say as well that we have others that we work with that are not within Toronto because their talent is so great. So that would be my advice. Do a lot of listening. Know that we are still in a process of piloting a lot of decisions, and it still will take time to know what's going to work for each organization as an individual organization.
Wow, thank you so much, Jason. Really, that intentionality I hear come through so large as well. Thank you for that. Next question: how should leadership prevent or address burnout in employees? And this is really a question for everyone. And so I'll bring us forward in this way. That's the first piece, and then there's a second piece to this question. So, what should leaders do when they're concerned that their personal burnout experiences are starting to impact their ability to lead? So, there's this two-pronged outward burnout and then inward burnout. Chad, perhaps I can throw it to you here to start us off.
Yeah, certainly. And I should acknowledge as well, I am in Nova Scotia right now, so I acknowledge that I am in traditional Mi'kmaq territory. So I'd like to make that acknowledgement before I start. Burnout, it's such a big question. So many people are thinking about this right now. To dovetail with what Jason was saying, leaders need to listen as well to their employees about burnout. Something that I'm drawing on just from my own studies, I like to think about this as in a sense of looking at ritual. Often we talk about ritual in a religious context, but when it comes to burnout, when we were going to the office, we had specific rituals in place. We got up, we got a coffee, we got into the car. I mean, everyone had their own ritual sense of how they would organize their day. Those rituals actually divided our workspace from our personal life. And when we're working from home, we need to recreate those rituals. It can be simple things. I mean, it can be going for a walk in the morning, making sure you go through patterns, breaking up your day, finding a time to have lunch. From a leadership perspective, what leaders need to do is they need to listen to the people that they are trying to lead, and ask them what they need to create that ritual space for themselves, to have that personal space. I think that's something very, very important.
CCN, Jason, anything to add there?
I would love to jump in. Chad, wow, I'm just blown away by your answer. And I love the fact that you use the word ritual in a non-religious sense. I've never heard it in that context, and you're so right. I'm going to dive a little bit personal. My partner works from home too, and I've seen him get up in the morning and still do the same thing when the pandemic was happening, because when the pandemic happened, I was off work. So I was taking my vacation around that time. So I didn't really see the effects of my work affected right now, but I saw him get up, go to shower, put on work clothes, exact work clothes that he would put on when he's going to work, to get into that frame of mind. And he said, I needed to get into that frame of mind, right? And so if we're going to talk about burnout, I loved that we said that the leaders need to listen. And in listening, you're also, when you have a really great leader that truly listens, they then in turn can listen to their employees and listen to their teammates when they themselves know that the employees can then turn around and say, you need to look at your work practice as well. Maybe your load is a little bit too heavy. And that's where you build a really good relationship as a leader with your employees and with your teammates, because the listening piggybacks off of each other. We can then share to say, you know what, we see what you're doing. Maybe it's time for you to take a load off. So listening in this context is really, 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 really important. And also having that great communication back and forth, because that's how we can know exactly what our employees are doing, what the leaders expect from us, and moving forward.
Thank you for that, Stacey. And you're right. Without that communication, things can go into dark corners, right? And so I really appreciate that perspective. Jason, anything you'd like to add to?
Sure. I'll add something here from the perspective of leaders potentially burning out, which I know was the last part of your question, Melissa. I think what the pandemic has done, it has caused many of us to become a lot busier, right? So apropos of what Chad was saying in terms of rituals, some of those rituals that we had that really gave us a sense of structure and balance kind of disappeared. So people are working well into the night and not really having concept of when to shut down. And so what it has forced leaders to do, and if people are not doing it, I strongly encourage them to, is to practice the art and science of delegation and to make sure that you are building up a disposition of trust. So much of what actually keeps people burning the midnight oil is them feeling like they have to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders because they're not properly delegating and they're not fully trusting their team to really be able to do the amazing work that they're capable of. There's a lot of other areas to explore in this. I think that work culture is so focused and fixated on outcome and perfection as opposed to process. And so, there's a lot of people who don't have trust in their team because they're thinking, is the outcome going to be perfect right out of the gate? It is okay to actually be a little bit scrappy along the way. And it's okay with your customers or your clients or your audiences to be able to bring them into the space of things aren't always perfect right away, right? And so all of those pieces, if leaders are okay to delegate more, to really feel like they can trust their teams, and really work in collaboration and build the rituals and build the structures, it really, really will help. And the last thing that I'll say is we're all human beings. We all need help and support. And I find that I'm in conversation with a lot of leaders that are saying, I'm actually realizing now that it's actually okay for me as that person that people tend to come to for help to find those support systems for myself. And so if you are one of those leaders that feels it's time to make that happen, there's always someone or somebody that you can actually turn to actually get that support for yourself.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jason. In terms of Stacey Ann or Chad, anything to add in terms of leaders that might be feeling this personal burnout?
I think Jason said it perfectly with knowing when is the time to really ask for help. I think so many times leaders feel like they need to carry the weight of everything on their shoulders. And this is where your employees are for. This is where your teammates are for. When you've built that great relationship where trust is there, the communication is easy to have, this is where a leader can say, you know what, I'm feeling the burn. Is there any outlet? Is there support that you can give me? And with a true leader, when I say true leader, when a leader is so loved and a leader is really in it, the support from the employees and the teammates are going to come pouring in. And sometimes, like I say, the teammates will see it first too. I can say, you know what? Maybe it's a time for you to just take a break, take a pause.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chad.
No, I think that's right, Stacey Ann. I mean, I think when a leader is effective, they create a sense of family. And when there's a sense of family, I mean, there can be conflict. All families have conflict, but families also come together and support each other. And so if you can create that dynamic, then regardless of whether it's the head of the family, if that's the leader, people will come together to support each other. And in that sense, delegate throughout the entire structure. And it's very, very important and fundamental for the survival of any organization to have that family feeling.
And I hear this element around community, which is a beautiful segue into the next question I have for everyone, which is how should leadership foster a sense of community with those who are working from home, all while some are working from the office? How do we do that community piece? And this is out to anyone to jump in with their thoughts.
I mean, I guess I can continue on. I mean, I do imagine as we start having more hybrid situations, we do still need to have people come together. Again, like any family, like any relationships, having distance, although we can work in a, you know, away from each other, we also have to come together in a social sense. We have to reaffirm our relationships. So I do think that's very, very important in community building, and companies, it is about community building. We cannot forget that. We have to have that family factor.
I love this piece that you've said, which adds on, you know, there's this affirming and then there's a reaffirming. So it's a continual process, I hear in that as well. Jason or CCN?
Yeah, I would love to add on that. And I'm going to add on that by throwing a whole bunch of flowers at Jason, you know, our leader here. When we have team meetings twice a week. And Chad, you're in Newfoundland, I'm in Toronto. I feel like you're in the same room with me. You know, our conversation, we are a family. Our conversations, we provide, there's a space that is provided where we all feel safe. I can speak for everyone when I say that. We're all seen, we're all heard. You know, we take roles in leading the meetings. So that creates that fostering right there. We're already building that without being in person all the time. And of course, you know, there's a time when we met in person, we're doing the photo shoot, we met in person when we had our 1 year celebration. And that feels awesome as well, because we feel like we already know each other. Even when I just met some of my teammates for the first time, the only thing I'm probably surprised that, oh, you're maybe a little shorter than I thought, you know, but I feel like I know you already talked, you know, and it's just like, it just came together so beautifully. So as a leader, Jason, thank you for creating that. And for giving us a space where we all feel so seen and heard and safe.
Aw, thank you, Stacey Ann. We also like to have a good laugh sometimes. And the joke that I'm going to make is, apparently, Chad, you're in Newfoundland right now.
Oh.
I'm sorry, Chad.
I'm close. I'm close to Newfoundland.
Chad, I said that and you didn't correct me.
That's what
See? That's why you're my brother. Thank you. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, what else can I say? You know, I mean, creating community is really about making, finding ways to really make sure that people are feeling like they're relating to each other and not necessarily just work. So how do you relate to each other? It's not only work that we actually relate. Sure, we have a meeting of the minds because we are all here for a very particular reason. And that goes for every organization, but people are interested in other things as their job. So if you're not in the workplace and you don't have an opportunity to run into someone at the water cooler and talk to them about the weekend or what they're going to be doing after work, you have to make sure that you are doing that in ways that actually means that there's going to be continuity and where that doesn't stop. And so I think that some people aren't thinking about that connectivity adhesive. And so that makes us continue to work, and then we forget that we are much more than our jobs. And so, yes, here at our particular firm, we do find ways to tap into the way people are feeling or what people might be doing. We like to gamify some of the ways in which we relate to each other, so things can actually be light and fun, because a lot of the work that we do is actually very, very heavy, and just organizations across the board, many people are dealing with a lot of stress. And so I think creating community also means, what are you about outside of work, and how do we relate? How do we make sure that we're having a way to connect outside of what we do between 9 to 5?
And I want to add on to that, Melissa. Also, I love that in our meetings, we ask, what do you need support with? You know, so if we have some time in our schedule that we can help each other, I really love that question. What do you need support with this week? So I just wanted to add that in too.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. The next question we have is, what are some onboarding considerations for new employees who were hired during the pandemic? I mean, there's no playbook written on this, right? What are your thoughts here? Perhaps, Stacey Ann, I can throw that to you.
Sorry, I was muted for a second. I love that this line of work was new to me when I started. I'm primarily from the film industry. And so I was so used to going into work, 14 hours a day, driving into the studio, leaving, and just that was work for me. And so the transition into the space of being home, what I love about our company and how we made it so comfortable was, like I said, the meetings that we have, the asking of questions like, how are you doing? What do you need support with? Just to, and then not only that, the door was always open where I can always knock on a teammate's door and say, I'm not understanding this right now. Can you help me? Knock on Jason's door to give the support that is needed, and really taking the time to tend to us as we grow. Because I feel like we all came in here, we're all flowers, right? And we water each other. And it's so important that we do this. So that's my take on this, Melissa.
Fantastic. Chad, maybe I could throw it to you.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with, as far as onboarding considerations, I mean, I think what we have to really consider is that each person is unique. I mean, we all have different learning needs. We all have different ways of approaching materials. I think we all, if, being individually as leaders, especially if we're already at a company and someone else is coming in, we need to really listen carefully, listen to what they need. Not necessarily just teach. I mean, there's a place for teaching, but there's really a really important place for listening, and then trying to follow through and get the solution that person specifically needs, what they've asked for. That's a really important part of leadership and onboarding, right? I mean, if you're bringing someone in, you have to understand their needs in order for them to be successful, and it may not be the same needs you have. So I think we really have to have open ears, and in particular, with remote working, I mean, there's all kinds of new challenges. So one really has to have one's ears open and get rid of one's own ego. listen, and then try your best to follow through.
Thank you so much, Chad. Jason, anything to add there?
Yeah, Stacey Ann and Chad, my goodness, so many great things that you're bringing up. I'm going to go back to what the pandemic has done here, where onboarding is concerned. So what the pandemic has done is it's forcing organizations to really think very hard on where their systems are. Right. And so how organized is your shared folder? Just for an example, are you really using the best communication platforms? So just taking a look at your systems and really making sure that they are, very, very effective is so important, because when people are coming into new position, if they are people who are working remotely, the onboarding process is going to be that much more effective and more seamless if the organization has done that work, right? So really think about your systems. Another thing that it's really forced people to think about is it's forcing people to think about their identity and their culture, because people aren't going to necessarily be among each other to really be able to pick up on things that would then make them create in their own mind what they feel the culture and the narrative actually is, right? Sometimes in conjunction with what you actually say it is. If people are working remotely, then they're going to be looking for the organization to really demonstrate that in almost every interaction that you have. And so, Stacey Ann and Chad have been referring to some things with respect to our firm here at BIPOC Executive Search. And I think Stacey Ann mentioned that, it's not always me leading meetings. I don't know if I've led a meeting for like the past, I would say 6 months, I feel, because each individual has an opportunity to say that they are going to have the microphone, they are going to be facilitating, and they are going to self-determine some of the things that they feel is going to be really, really important for us to be speaking about as a conglomerate, as a group. And so right away, even though people are working remotely, they say, this tells me something about the culture here. Even if you look at, the dynamic that we have with our little quartet right now, you have myself, who's the president managing partner. You have Chad, who's our amazing technical writer and data analyst. You have Stacey Ann, who's our amazing marketing and content manager. And you have Melissa, who's our amazing engagement manager, consultant, principal. And so it's not a dynamic where the people who are on the Hollywood squares are all individuals that are client facing, for example. So
Right.
again, people get a sense of culture, even if they're not seeing each other in person. And so I would really encourage for onboarding, really get your systems down pat, your platforms down pat, make sure that's very sharply defined so that when people come in, they can say, wow, I feel like I'm going to be able to really hit the ground running because you figured it out before me, questioning why things are done a certain way. And then the identity piece is really, really important. And the culture piece needs to be demonstrated so that when people are being onboarded, it's almost something that's just by osmosis, as opposed to them having to read up on what your culture and your onboarding processes are really about.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And, I'll add to this in terms of my experience here at the firm. When I was first onboarded into this amazing team of folks that, not just stand in their values, but walk with these values consistently. There was a question that was asked in one of the first team meetings that I was in, which was, what do you need to be you? And I have to say, I'd never been asked that in my career. And my career spans in people and culture. And so really wonderful to see that kind of change making being lived. It's one thing to talk about it. It's a whole other thing to have me express that, not only to myself, not only to my leaders, but also to the entire team of leaders as well. So people are learning a little bit about who I am, not just professionally but more personally as well. So I absolutely love that. Thank you so much, everyone. Just wow. The wisdom and heart and soul in this panel is fantastic. Thank you. Next question. Our question here is, how should leadership manage the anxieties of employees who are hesitant about returning to in-person work? And I'll bring this into our panel here. This is out to anyone that wants to start us off here. So here we're talking about managing the anxieties of employees. We know that we're in the midst of this pandemic. We're towards the end, right? But for a lot of it, we haven't been able to see the head or the feet of it. And so what are some things that come to mind? Perhaps, Chad, would you like to jump?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we can almost bring the full circle to bring it back to what Jason was saying at the very, very beginning. I mean, leaders need to come in and listen very carefully to what their employees need. I mean, if we're talking about having a hybrid situation where some employees, stay at home, some come back to work, each individual is going to excel in a different type of environment. And as Jason was saying, it's, essentially it's an employee's market right now. So, leaders are also going to want to make sure they can retain the best talent by giving them what they need to excel. And that's very likely going to be some sort of hybrid. It's not going to be simply saying everyone has to come back. If you don't come back, too bad.
Or else.
Or else. I mean, that's simply a really, really bad way of approaching things. So, listening carefully, and then giving people what they need, listening to what they are saying they need, rather than simply dictating this is what we want to be done.
If I could piggyback off what Chad was saying, I really love that you brought it back full circle to what Jason said in the beginning about listening, because I think when the pandemic happened and the transition was made to work from home, leaders had to then listen to the employees to see how can they best work effectively from home, right? And so when we're coming back now, we're easing out of the pandemic, and if there's a need to come back into work, it's the same full circle then to say perhaps somebody who had anxiety from working from home now loves it. And maybe vice versa. So I think that's where it really comes into fostering a community and a family with your employees to be able to have those conversations to say what is best for you, because what is best for you is essentially best for the company and best for all of us, right? So I think it's just a great way. It really ties in with listening. And I saw this meme online that I absolutely love that shows the definition between a boss and a leader. And a boss will be telling you what to do, and a leader jumps right into it and is leading you. is right there with you, showing you what to do. There's a difference between telling and showing. And that's where the compassionate comes around. That's where being empathetic and all of these tools that we have, that a leader will have, comes from listening.
Wow, wow, wow. Yes. So this active listening piece is definitely a pattern that I'm hearing throughout this discussion. Jason, anything to add here?
Certainly, yes. The active listening is important. Now, let's look at it from the context of, some companies that actually do, for some reason, have a very good reason for people having to come into work, right? Not
Sure.
all environments can support people working from home. And those people are still allowed to have anxieties about having to come in, but still want to retain their job. Then you have some people who have work or who are capable of working from home, but still prefer to do from the office. And so what are you going to do to make sure the office is safe, right? So, we do need to make sure, or leaders need to make sure that if they're in that particular situation, that they are obviously communicating very clearly about what it is that they're doing to make it safe, right? So we don't necessarily have here the list of things that you're supposed to do, but you're going to need to think about it, and you're going to need to communicate it very effectively to your staff so that they can say, my anxieties are being alleviated because there's transparency and there's a lot of clarity. When things happen into the world, it informs let's just relate it to work, different positions that all of a sudden come online. There was no COVID-19 a couple of years ago. And so there was no such thing as someone who was a COVID-19 temperature checker, or a COVID-19 contact tracer, or someone who was a screen manufacturer and installer, or someone who literally pumped out millions upon billions of face masks. So there are ways in which organizations can kind of find tools that actually make an employee say, okay, you're taking my health and my well-being very, very seriously. And so are you looking into some rapid tests? Are there actually now some people supplying rapid tests that you can bring on board for your organization so that there's a constant screening loop happening so that people know that they're being protected? And if there is someone that actually has an outbreak, are you going to be in full transparency as an employer and say, this is what's happening, so you should stay home for a period of time, or are you going to try to be covert? Which I would say, please don't. Please don't. So it's really important for employers to do whatever they can to bring in the resources and the tools that are going to keep people safe, really have frameworks that people have to abide by. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. This is the policy in terms of how you actually have to be if you show up to work, in terms of mask policies, distancing policies, all of the things that public health has already laid out for us so eloquently. And then again, make sure that you are in full communication should anything happen, so your employees know that you're taking all their health very, very seriously.
And this thread that I hear weave through is that there's both. There's that physical safety, and then there's also that psychological safety that's in play here. It's both. We do have some questions from the audience, and so I'll ask the first one. What is the best way to let management know that I'm burning out? What's some language that we can help here with? What is the best way to let management know that I'm burning out?
I love that you say, what are some languages? Because I feel like sometimes when an employee wants to let their leader know that they are burning out, it's probably coming from a sense like, I probably don't want them to think that I'm not capable of doing the job. And so when we talk about definitely creating and fostering that community and that family, it would then make it a lot easier for an employee to say, you know what, this is a little bit too much on my plate right now, and I need a pause moment, or I need support, or I need help. And I don't want to piggyback to what we do here, but that's why I love that we ask before we even need to ask. The question is put out there, what do you need support with? So I think if employers can your employees are your family. At the end of the day, work is another part of your home because you spend so much time at work. right? So when you create this community with your family and this understanding and this trust, then employees can come to you and to be able to ask that question without seeming like they cannot do their job, because that fear of I'm incapable or I can't do it anymore will probably be in the back of their head, right? So creating that pathway and that lane and that door for an employee to easily transition or easily knock on your door to say, hey, at this, my plate is a little bit heavy at the moment, you know?
I think that's really powerful. I think that's so powerful, Stacey Ann, in terms of, wanting to, there's another driving force that's underneath burning out, right? So there can be this driving narrative around, I'm not good enough already playing in the background, right? And so then you feel like, okay, I want to make sure that I'm contributing and I'm valuable to the organization. And so having this conversation and, that piece around leading into the conversation with intentionality. I care so much about this organization, this mission, the work I'm doing. And, can we think of ways to support this work? I'm feeling, towards this play area around burnout. It's interesting how some organizations, they can sometimes hold burnout as a badge, right? And so there is this redefining of culture that's a part of this conversation as well. Jason, were you wanting to add something there?
Yeah, I'm just going to jump right on what Stacey Ann said, because she hit it on the nail, and then I'll provide some framing. So the first step really should be a conversation about looking at your plate and what's on it, and having that honest conversation about what can we do to distribute some of the work, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't even have to bring burnout up at first, because what it suggests is maybe your manager won't show support, right? So maybe you just want to have a very open conversation saying, there's quite a bit that's on my plate. And so I'm just wondering, what can we do perhaps to distribute some of the work? Which is closely related to, is it time for us to build capacity? So do we have to hire, right? Is there a need to actually do we need a net new person to add to headcount? Or do we need to just determine what is on my plate that might actually be best to live in a different portfolio just because the volume is increasing? There always needs to be those checkpoints where you do have those conversations if things start to spiral in a way where it's kind of getting out of control. And sometimes, leaders and managers don't necessarily know the way that feels for the employee or worker unless they're actually going to be open and transparent about it. Now, if for some reason the reaction is not one where it leads to some more coming off your plate or some new person coming in to support the work, then you do have to have, you have to first in your mind determine who are going to be your supporters, right? Sometimes it's not good to go directly to the manager. Maybe it's good to just have a conversation with someone that you trust to just kind of see if there's anything that they would suggest. If not, yes, you're gonna have to go to the manager and say, okay, so there's an issue here now that I feel like I'm having that I need to bring back, and that is I am going to burn out, and I am responsible at the end of the day for my own well-being. So that would probably be the steps that I would recommend, starting off with what Stacey Ann was saying in terms of, really taking a look at your plate and determining if some have to come off, if a new person has to come in, and then if you have to get support from some others, and then go to the manager again and say, let's definitely talk about the burnout.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'll move on to the other question, to the next question. We have another from our audience, which is, what was a pivotal moment that made you appreciate the leadership in your workplace? Chad, perhaps you could start us off there. I'll say it again. What was a pivotal moment that made you appreciate the leadership in your workplace?
Well, I mean, I'll reiterate what you yourself said. At BIPOC Executive Search, being asked how the company can help in my own personal development. I mean, a question like that coming from an employer, I mean, it's that really makes one appreciate one's leadership, because that is ultimately, again, we've all come together to do a specific job, and we do have a specific job that needs to get done. But for each of us as individuals to really be able to be present and to feel like the company is a family, we also have to feel like we can be ourselves. And to be oneself, one has to have support to do whatever it is that is our passion, that drives us. And it may not be always complete, just work, right? We all have our separate passions. And so having a workplace that brings that up and that cares about that, I mean, that to me is the epitome of what leadership is. If you have a space that allows that question to even be asked, you've got it. You've got the leadership, right? And if the leadership truly follows through to help and to support each person, well, that now you've created a family. So it's no longer a company, and it's in my opinion, I think it would be something that's unstoppable because it becomes a really strong unit.
Chad, wow. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And
I would
go ahead.
Sorry, Mel. No, sorry, Mel. No. Continue, and then I'll.
Well, I was just going to say this piece around the personal support, and then doing something about that, and how it weaves this golden thread through the whole community within the organization. I got chills. Stacey, please.
I was like, Chad, you are preaching today.
Yes.
I'm gonna throw a whole nother bunch of roses to Jason. I think what a pivotal moment was for me was joining this company. I wasn't asked, what do you bring to the table? It was more like, I know what you have, and I will love for this to be on the table. You bring value. It wasn't asking, what do you bring? What are you going to do for us? It's like, no, I know what you are capable of. I know what you have, and I will love for your value to add. And I was like, okay, you feel appreciated right off the bat. And I think every employee wants to feel appreciated. Seriously, just appreciated. It's a little thank you. I see what you're doing. Thank you so much. It goes a long way, because then as an employee or as a teammate, you feel fuel. I'm up at 12 o'clock in the night, past hours. Like, I got to work on this video. I got to do this project because I love it so much. Appreciation goes such a long way. And like my dad always says, there's two words in that really means a lot, that goes a long way. And he's like, please and thank you. And I think once we can show that and say that, you will have some employees and some teammates that are just ready to fly with you.
Talk about loyalty, right? If I might add to the vase of flowers for Jason, if I might add to that, I've worked in a lot of different organizations, and I've learned different things from those organizations, whether it was great or good or not so good. And in here, I don't know if I'm going to get a little choked up, pardon me. I don't know if I've ever felt as seen and heard as I do here. And so thank you, Jason.
Oh, thanks all of you for your incredible words, but this just being so incredible. I really feel like everybody on this mod and matter that we call Earth has a contribution to make. Everyone has strengths, everyone has talents, everyone has interests that should be fully realized. And, the way that we are here at the firm is we want to tap into that. We want to know that that is a part of what makes you you, and part of bringing your whole self in terms of injecting that into your work. And so, it's I'm about to get choked up. I'll do the crying officially after we hang up. But that's thank you. I wasn't expecting that question from the audience. That turned into all of that.
And so in terms of wrapping up our conversation, I'd love to throw out a fun question. And a fun question, this would go to whoever would like to answer first. When you think about these core values, right? The ones that you want to hold in your hand and your heart as you think about your leadership practice. What does that look like for you? I
can go first. I think for me, because I love that we are all leaders on this team. I love that. For me, the core value for me is serving. Like, I love to serve my teammates. I love to help in whatever capacity I can. I love to hold that big ring light, personal ring light for you and shine it on you because when I come in with my messages or my emails, it's always a big yes. It's like I want you to feel seen and heard because I see you and I hear you. And I don't know what personal battles we may be going through where one day we don't feel so much seen. So if I can serve as much as I can and shedding light and reminding you of your greatness, bigging you up, that makes me feel really good inside. And that is one of my key core values, is to make sure that everyone around me feels seen and feel heard. And as much as I can, safe as possible. But I will be your ring lighter. I will have the fan that Beyonce fan, and I will blow it on you and I will shine it on you because yes, you are amazing.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Servant leadership. Chad, perhaps I could throw it to you. When you think about that, what's in your hand and your heart for leadership?
I mean, for me, it's connecting with individuals. I mean, having a one-on-one connection with someone, hearing their story, connecting stories, feeling like your family. I mean, even if you're just working through something quite mundane, you're doing training, you're doing this, but connecting with individuals and learning about how individuals work, which creates a friend and family type dynamic. I mean, that's what drives me, and I think it's an important part of leadership to have that connection. I mean, without that connection, there's everything else falls apart, because it creates loyalty on both sides. You create, that's what family and friends are about. You create a sense of loyalty between two people because you share stories, and you share those stories, and you feel connected, and you just want the other person to succeed. They want you to succeed, and it just snowballs in a good way into something bigger and bigger. So it's that connection, those narratives, and telling stories with each other and creating those friendships.
I love this connection piece. I love how it ripples out into other places, right? That connection. Thank you so much. Jason, when you think about your core values as a leader, what comes through for you?
Wow. Okay. Chad, Stacey Ann, Melissa, just love everything that you are saying in this hour. I think, let me say this. I think that leaders need to be prepared to go to battle for the people that they work with. They need to be prepared to walk through fire for the people that they work with. And the people that work with them will be able to feel it. They'll be able to get a really strong sense if you are going to go to battle for me and you are actually going to be my shield. And like Stacey Ann says, big me up, have my back. That is so, so important. And when a leader does that, people will do that for you as well. So it becomes an exchange where people that are working with the company are just as prepared to go to battle, just as prepared to walk through the line of fire, because you're demonstrating that that's your style and that's how you're going to show up for people. Thinking about service leadership, I really see my role as everyone's agent in a way, right? So when you think about an agent, there's someone who is a broker between anyone and them. So, how are you as a leader going to be supportive of me as my agent? And not even just in the sense of work, but in sense of life as well. So I think that Chad brought up that, here at the firm, it isn't just about what are your professional goals. Personal goals are something that we really do embed as well. As Stacey Ann said, we spend so much time at work. Work and life are just kind of more and more becoming inextricably linked. And so, why wouldn't an organization say, if you are interested in home ownership, perhaps there can be things that we can help out with at the firm in terms of the resources that might be useful for you to be able to say that you have in hand to make that happen. If somebody is interested in, more education or whatever it is, but there's a ton of things that we can think about in our personal life that sometimes we're not even able to really give a lot of thought to because work is just so consuming. It just literally like seeps into everything. And therefore we just wake up one day and we say, wait a minute, how is that like 3 years that went by? And I didn't focus on, if I could just say, Chad, you know, that book that I wanted to write, right? I already know Chad is busy writing his books, as you can see behind him. But again, if there's a personal goal to have that published, why couldn't we as a firm think about how we support him and not just make it about invest all of your time and energy into this, and everything else that you had aspirations about, you know, is completely off the table. When you work here and sign this contract, nothing else about you and your life matters. And, you know, apropos of mentioning book, a lot of us are writing a book together, right? So, you know, in terms of leadership, how can you bring your family together to actually say you do things together? And so it isn't just about Melissa writing a book or Stacey Ann writing a book or Chad writing a book or Jason writing a book. Certainly, if we have, you know, pet projects that we want to do, we should. But why can't we actually come together and say this book is authored by the core team, you know, with everyone having their chapter and everyone having their flowers, as Stacey Ann Buchanan says. So, you know, leadership is about all of those pieces. And I feel that, you know, so much of what leadership has been about throughout time has been about power. About control. It's been about direction. It's been about, you know, someone that's out front and everyone's a follower, as opposed to getting a little scrappy, getting a little interesting, making sure everyone has their time, their stage, their microphone. And the more that you can do that, the more people really feel integrated, really feel like they do belong. And, you know, everyone wins. It creates a win-win for literally everybody. So that's leadership, creating win-wins for everybody.
Thank you so much. Wow. BIPOC executive search, folks. I'm honored by our esteemed guests that have joined this panel discussion. I'm honored to have hosted this discussion as well. First time. I appreciate everyone's grace as I move through this process. If we haven't been able to get to your question, we will certainly circle back afterwards. We thank you so much for spending your time with us, and we'll see you soon. Take care.